Hello, welcome to Chapter 2 of our Turnbull text, talking about family interaction. Good to see you again. Our agenda, I'm only going to talk for about 5 to 7 minutes. I've posted in Canvas an excellent description, I think, that gives you a little bit more detail on some of the family systems theory, the assumptions that underlie that. But I just wanted to go over this just briefly with you to give you some perhaps further insight in as you complete the activity for this chapter. So basically what we're talking about in this chapter is family systems theory and some of the assumptions that underlie that. The first assumption talks about the input-output, that the family characteristics, all of those variables that we talked about from Chapter 1, those go into the family, all the background stuff, all the socioeconomic status, the unique circumstances, language proficiency, all of that goes in and is meshed around a little bit, and then that forms through interactions within the system. That forms the outputs that come out of the system, how the family interacts with those in the social environment. Very important assumption with family systems theory is that we understand the family as a whole and not just as looking at one person or one part of the family and saying, oh, well, that's everything about the family. Again, in Chapter 1, I mentioned culture of poverty. You can see where this would go with certain racial and ethnic minorities who find themselves in poverty in a disproportionate sense. And number 3, the boundaries. The boundaries thing, I think, is one of the most interesting aspects of family systems theory, because it's how, it's to what extent individuals within and without the system are regulated, and some of those cultural and social tools or symbols, if you will, how those are allowed to pass within the family, and then what tools and symbols and things like that are passed out of the family, and kind of the barriers and boundaries that individuals set up with each other. You might think of Facebook. Because it's one of the most interesting, I think, examples of the boundaries that we set. Very interestingly, I am friends with many of my family members' cousins, for example, but I do not see every post that they post. So the boundary is definitely set a little bit higher for me versus my wife, who actually does see more of the posts of my family members than I do. Another boundary that we actually have is I do not friend my parents or my wife's parents on Facebook, because that's a boundary that I would like to set with them. We all have those boundaries, and I think it's important to kind of critically examine those. I'm not going to go into each one of the subsystems, but if you understand a little bit from your reading the family systems theory that there are multiple subsystems, this marital subsystem is one, and how this impacts the child, the stability of the marriage, for example. The parental subsystem, the book talked at length about foster parents and adoptive parents, which I thought was very interesting, especially when we talk about the legal rights of individuals in the legal rights of parents, foster parents, to make decisions, especially for students of special needs. And so that I felt was interesting. The next one, still continuing with the parental, the gay, lesbian parents, there has been research substantiating the claims of bullying for children of gay or lesbian or LGBT, all the other acronym letters, parents, same-sex couple parents, if you will. so on and so forth, with just single father, single mother, parents, and the interaction that entails with children. The sibling subsystem. I did not focus a whole lot on this, not having any siblings, but you might find it interesting how much some siblings take care of other siblings, and some of the roles, like for instance the educational role. I typically find more educators are the older sibling within the family, simply because they've had that role since they were young, and education seems like a viable interest and option. The extended family subsystem, the role of culture is very important with this. We find this in many different cultures, that extended family is the same word. For example, family in French. Let me give you that example. So in French, when you talk about family, it actually does include cousins, second cousins, third cousins. For me, typically when I think of, if somebody asks me, oh, how big's your family? Well, I typically say it's very small, because I'm just thinking of my dad and I, versus if you were to ask a typical French person, for example, well, how big's your family? Well, they could go on and on forever, because maybe their family spans back generations and has multiple lines, generations upon generations, and has multiple lines all over the place, and so it could be a very long conversation. Cohesion and adaptability are two items that we're going to focus on in the activity for this chapter. So when we look at the emotional bonding that family members have within those subsystems, we find that this is the most intriguing area, to find out what is the actual real connection, the bonding connection between individuals in those different subsystems. What is that real connection between the siblings, the real connection between parents and grandparents, which may open up a whole new can of worms, and between, of course, the child and the parents. Again, talking about those boundaries and the implications of those boundaries. The adaptability, the change in response to stress and organization, negotiations amongst the subsystems. In general, when my wife and I were first growing our family with our first child, we had a high degree of control and structure within our environment. It was one of those things that my grandma said when we had a baby. You need to set up a structure. Everything needs to go on time, things like that. And that created a lot of stress within our environment. And that stress of keeping to structure spilled over into our dealings with friends and other family members. So as we are now on our third child, we have a lot less stress because of the adaptability that we have grown and learned to balance within our lives. So as you complete the activity, I do want you to think a little bit about that balance between cohesion and adaptability, and how those two things together really will indicate the quality of relationships that you'll see within the families that you interact with, and may also indicate something for you as you're working with families of individuals with special needs, and the quality of relationship that you might be able to entertain, and thinking about that, how you interact and how you make suggestions to the family or deal with issues, and how you deal with the stressful situations that can sometimes arise when dealing with the educational system and individuals and families of individuals with special needs. So think about that as you go through the activity. Look forward to your responses, and see you again next time.